Greetings and welcome to The Thirsty Mage, the podcast that's no stranger to shady business dealings. I'm your host, the Spriggan colluder David Lloyd, and this episode we're going to be taking part in a spoiler-free review of the latest game in the ever-growing Legends of Heroes series, Trails Through Daybreak. Here to join me for this review is the man you call when you need dirty deeds done dirt cheap. It's Jordan Rudick.
Maybe that's the reason I haven't been here. I've been doing too many of those dirty deeds. I haven't been here. We haven't done this in a while, it feels like. But no, it's just the start of summer, kids being done school, and it's always kind of throws the schedule into a loop. Everything's gone topsy-turvy a little bit. So we'll try to get back to our regularly scheduled podcasting that we've been doing on the weekends here in the mornings, and I'm looking forward to it. This is a game that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think that almost everybody who played it really, really liked it. And hilariously, the day that reviews came out and the game, I guess around the time the game was launching, they announced the sequel. Is getting localized, of course, right? So if you loved it, there's more coming. So that was kind of nice too.
They kind of had to announce a sequel because it leaked initially.
That's right, yeah.
But I don't think it was. I think the announcement wasn't too far off. I think that was kind of it was one of those things. Well, even with the Nintendo leaks, they're talking about a lot of the leaks seem to be when the companies are preparing the social media stuff. Like they're either putting videos up on YouTube in private, or they're putting up drafts, I guess, in social media. And I guess like the people who had administrator access were getting the inside peek to this stuff. So it's going to be interesting going forward, seeing how these companies kind of combat that. And but I mean, at the end of the day, like it's not that surprising given that we knew that the games exist. So
exactly, and it's not even a ways off. Like it's the beginning of 2025, right? So it's probably within 6 to 9 months, I would say.
Well, that's really the biggest surprise is just how quickly they're turning it around. So that's good.
Yeah, it seems to be maybe a little bit more of a recognition of the popularity of this series in the West. That's certainly growing. With the Cold Steel series kind of wrapping up, and then I guess bringing over the two Crossbell games. Like it's hard to deny that the people outside of Japan really, really like these games and are starting to recognize just how strong they are as RPGs.
Yeah, really, like most of them anyway. I was bitterly disappointed playing Trails Through or Trails to Every. I was actually scared for this game going into it because it was such a disappointment when I played Reverie. It just felt like this add-on game that did not need to exist. That I don't know. It was like I don't even know what to say about it. I don't want to go too much into Reverie because it was just so disappointing. Like the story was a mess. The like there's too many characters. The battle system was a complete chaotic mess. Which is funny because to me it was like they didn't really. It was pretty much the same battle system throughout Cold Steel, except there were systems built upon systems, and then like Cold Steel 4 was I feel like they straddled the line of order and chaos, and that the combat system just barely worked. But then Reverie, they're like, well, we're just gonna slap a few more systems on here, and then it just like the whole house of cards crumbled on the battle system for me. So.
Yeah, and it's funny. I like the game quite a bit. I think I gave it like an 8.5 or 8 or something like that. And then after the game came out, there was a little bit more of that sentiment that you're expressing of like, oh, this is a downer in the series, and if this is what with the way things are heading or the way things are going, like, oh, is that a bad sign? But fortunately, the next game we would all end up playing Trails Through Daybreak. Definitely like a rejuvenation point, I would say, for the series, and certainly as a good sign of things to come moving forward.
Yeah. So, what's your initial? Like you have the review out. You seem to, based on the review, you seem to enjoy it. But yeah, why don't you tell us about your impressions of the overall impressions of the first new game in the next story arc?
Yeah, so obviously the move to Calvard, the region we really haven't explored so far, we've only heard about, was going to be an interesting one because you're so familiar with other parts of Zamuria, having visited them in multiple games. And so like, oh, I remember this city. I know this part of the map. And it's all kind of become very familiar. And that's nice to a point. But yeah, it was definitely time to go to an area where things are going to feel different and look different, and that's certainly the case with Daybreak. I found the beginning of the game very slow, actually, to the point where I was struggling a bit to get into it. Like, we were lucky to have the review code quite early, even with the Switch version, so that was cool. But I
Speak for
found myself,
yourself.
yeah, no, yeah, no, exactly.
I didn't
But
get it that early, but I'm glad I got
just
it. But
for a Switch version, I think is rare, right? Like
oh yeah,
normally Switch
yeah.
versions, if it's a multi console game, they come later than other ones typically. But yeah, so I I was like, oh, I've got all this time before the embargo is up, so I'll just take my time. And it wasn't until like maybe I'm trying. I don't know exactly what point in the story I started like getting into a little bit more, but I definitely had to have like a full party, probably 4 characters before I started thinking, oh, like wow, like, this is really really good. And just more scenes with Van and the other characters in as opposed to just like him by himself. Like there are a lot of moments where you're just with him and he's kind of just exploring around, but when you finally start to see his interactions with more of the people around him, and they're kind of talking about him too, I started to really get into it. And yeah, I really really like this game. It's definitely one of my favorite in the series. I don't know if it's my top number one, but top three for sure. And I put in the notes that I think Van might be the most interesting protagonist of I'm just thinking of the three kind of main ones like Reen, Lloyd, and now Van. He just feels a little bit more real, a little bit more human, and not just like kind of a more fairy tale type of hero. Like he has like a gruff exterior. He has things about him that are unlikable, I think. And I think that kind of humanization of him is a really just a breath of fresh air. And so I think that I mean, again, the protagonists always kind of make the story in games like this, but I think he's definitely my favorite one now, and I just like how different he is from Reen and Lloyd.
Yeah, I'm going to point out that there's going to be thousands of Falcom fans that are going to cancel you on social media for not
I
mentioning
know.
Estelle as a
Yeah,
protagonist.
no, well, that's hard, right? Like, because I'm not as familiar with the Sky trilogy, right?
Yeah,
Knowing that they haven't been like kind of widely released, and hopefully that rumor of a remake is going to be one or more of those games, right? And then I can say like, yeah, Estelle and Joshua, I like them as much too. But yeah, I can only speak to the ones that have been like released more recently, and so
yeah,
and also the fact that like they're kind. I think those three are kind of meant to be foils of each other as well. Like you've designed Van to be different from Reen and Lloyd in particular. I think.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think of those three, like Van Estelle is still my number one.
Yeah.
But Van of the three you mentioned, the three male protagonists, I guess, or
Hmm.
whatever you want to say, the um, Van would be my favorite. He's just, I guess, maybe the most interesting. I guess Reen would be closer. Like Lloyd's kind of your Captain America type, I guess.
Yeah,
Like the,
exactly. He's a
you know,
little plain, and yeah, they're will probably get canceled for that too. But
yeah,
I know there's a lot of people that like Lloyd, and I do like them all. Like not to say that there's a bad one among them or something like that. But yeah, Van is yeah, man. He really I just love all the little quirks about him. I was really into his car. Just the way that like he finally starts like doing the head pat thing, but then gets told off for it. He's and then there's scenes with
loves the
him.
sweets,
Yeah,
loves the sweets.
that's just hilarious that he's got
Yeah,
like this sweet tooth. He's always seeking out like bakeries in the town he goes to. Like I'm like that too. Like when I go to a new place, I'm like seeking out. I have a sweet tooth as well, and
yeah.
I'm always seeking out things like that too. So I found some kinship in him as well. But
Well, yeah, like he does seem like the most human or the most complex of the three. Because with Reen, like he had, the whole demon herd or whatever. So they had this like he has this light and dark version to him, and that was kind of his shtick. And then yeah, Lloyd was kind of like the goody two shoe type, acting as the police detective who's trying to do everything right. But yeah, Van seems more human and like living in the gray, and yeah, he has like vices that are hilarious. I agree with you with that. Trails in through Daybreak does start off slower, especially
Mhm.
if you compare it to the other games, because I mean, Cold Steel, you started off with like this big group of kids in class 7, and then it just grew larger and larger every other game that came out. So it was, so you always were like in the thick of things from pretty much the start. But I kind of like that they recognized that things were getting out of hand by the end of the Cold Steel arc, and they said, okay, it's, we're in a new location, we got new characters, and we're going to kind of start things off slow, and they like kind of slowly introduced new characters as the chapters went on, and it gave you time to kind of get used to that character, get a little backstory from them, and then they'd move on to add a new character and then add a new character. And I feel like the pace, even though maybe it started off slow, the pace of the game was perfect in the sense of like you're never feeling overwhelmed with like, oh man, who's it? Like I got 10 people to figure out what's going on with, like, each time they added someone, it wasn't like the last people got pushed to the back or anything. Like
Mhm.
they were brought into the mix, and everyone was still getting their equal time, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, I think the you kind of quickly realize what the plot loop of each chapter is going to be, where you do encounter someone new and you spend time with them, but Van also gets to spend time by himself as well, kind of completing the side quest of four SPGs. And yeah, I think it settles into being a very satisfying loop where the chapters are actually quite lengthy. Like this is a long game. Like this is it's got to be one of the longer ones in the series. I don't know. I haven't like thought about like the comparison directly, but it felt like there's a lot of meat on this bone for sure, which makes sense. You're setting up a new arc and a new region and all that stuff. There's a lot of background to happen. Um, one thing I really liked as well was the contrast between like in some of the other games in the Trail series, you're taking a train to go everywhere, and this one you're driving, and it's this road trip kind of feeling, right? Of we're taking a road trip to a new city. Because someone has called us there to do like a main quest or a main event, and just seeing like all the characters kind of palling around in the car, like you generally making fun of Van. It's
Yeah,
so charming. Like I always love those scenes. I was unable to capture one of them for my video review. But it is something that I really kind of fondly look back on this game about, and I look forward to more of those scenes of, yeah, them just kind of driving down a country road or a highway and just kind of shooting the breeze. Like it's a nice departure from like all the students of class 7 just being on a train, and Rain kind of just going from train car to train car, which feels a little bit kind of colder or stale. This felt really kind of natural and again more real life to me. So I'd love those scenes in particular.
yeah. Well, and I like that they changed up the formula. Like with Cold Steel, they, the chapters were set up where you're at the school and you're doing stuff, and then yeah, you take a train out to somewhere to continue the story. Like something happens outside of class 7, and then they take the train back, and you do some school stuff again. And there's just so many RPGs with the school setting
Yeah,
that it's
yeah.
almost like there's almost too many now. Like it's almost like, okay, we've had plenty of that. Maybe it's time to move on to something else. And so the fact that we're like getting this kind of quasi private detective style gameplay loop now, where it's like, well, you kind of go out and do, you know, you got this board where Van is like taking on uh quests from people where they're like just odd jobs where they're like, here, I'll pay you some money if you can go do this or that. And then sometimes some of the tasks might be uh on the shadier side or whatever, and Van, uh you get to determine whether or not like you want to do it, or whether it's something that Van would do. And so it's kind of nice that they've like revamped this new system of like, okay, here's a new thing like we haven't done before. But the game itself still maintains like everything that, like, if you said to a Trails fan, like, what is it that you like about the series in general, like through the three loops, anything that they would say is in this game. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
spirit of this is completely still there. Like you still have like that loop of exploring the city that you're in, going out and do things. It still has like the heart of like they still have like these sappy lines where they're the enemies are still like complimenting the heroes. The heroes are
Mhm.
still like this mutual respect or whatever. Like everything is still what you would expect from a Trails game. I love that they brought back the Bracer Guild, like that they're more like in the Cold Steel, like the Bracer Guild is pretty non-existent to a certain extent. Like you find out that Erebonia bans the bracers, so there's only like a handful of them really in the game, and they're not technically like they're not really working per se via the guild. It's almost like they're just kind of there as support characters.
Mhm.
So I'm glad like the Bracer Guild is a much more important thing in this game. Even if you're not playing as them, you're almost like you're almost playing as like the dark version of the Bracer Guild to a certain extent. Like Van is still kind of spews the ideals, but doesn't feel beholden to like the strict rules that the Bracers still need to maintain.
Yeah, they represent like the goody two shoes kind of section, I guess that you mentioned, right? Where they're always doing things by the book, and he's always like, "Oh, I'll just get it done however I want," like
Yeah.
and he mentions this that he's kind of operating between like the dark and the light, or the legal and illegal. He's kind of straddling that line. But at the end of the day, like as much as he might say that, and as much as he like talks about like, oh, I'll do it as long as I get paid. He still kind of has that heart of gold, underneath it all. It just doesn't always like, it's not always the first thing that he mentions or that people, bring up with him. They do give him a hard time about like how he operates in the shadows, and that what he's doing isn't always like on the level necessarily, or that they might do it differently. But so many people like rely on him is the funny thing. Like he helps so many people in the game. Um, you just have scenes with people like profusely like thanking him, and there's a lot of appreciation for him wherever he goes too. Like he clearly is making a difference in people's lives, even if he's doing it his own way. But yeah, I love him. Like he's this independent character, and his life is kind of thrown for a loop as all these people just start joining his business, and he complains about it, but like he also loves it too. Like there's a great kind of back and forth dynamic of that as well. That he's so used to maybe operating on his own, but he's at his best when he has people around him supporting him, and when he's kind of working in tandem with others too.
Yeah. I guess we're gonna continue to get into depth of and for anyone listening, we're not going to go past the second. Well, we'll keep any story based stuff. Try to keep it within the demo, but we definitely won't go past the second chapter
Mm-hmm.
as we discuss things. But I guess for anyone who hasn't picked it up yet, just to give you a quick breakdown of how what's going on. So basically, the story is established as yeah, we're in Calvard, so we're in like the third main section of Zemuria. So the legend or the original Trails in the Sky took place in Liberl. The Crossbell arc, like the two games, uh, Azure and oh man, I'm blanking on
Zero.
Zero. That's it.
Yeah.
Zero and Azure took place in Crossbell, which is kind of a city in between Calvard and Erebonia, and then all of the Cold Steel games and Reverie take place in Erebonia and Cross. There's a lot of stuff in Crossbell in that series too. And yeah, so we always heard of Calvard, and there was always you would see characters that came from there, like in the original Trails in the Sky series, like we had Zin was like an bracer that was working in Liberal, and so we knew he was from Calvard. And there's some other characters that have come from there, but we've never been there yet, and now that's where we are. So this is taking place there, and the kind of the capital is called Edith, and that's kind of where we meet Van, who's currently doing private eye, I guess, type duties. The game, like even right off the bat, there's some mentions of how he was involved in the Cold Steel. Like they talk about Operation Meal Mirage, which is from the fourth Cold Steel game. That he was involved in some way, but they don't. At least early on, they haven't really gotten too detailed on on his involvement, other than he was doing things to help. The Erebonians, I guess. But the whole kind of premise of Trails Through Daybreak is that there's the MacGuffin in this game is the Genesis, the Genesis. I hope we're pronouncing that right. Where there's like these 8 prototype orbaments that have been kind of scattered, and the main character. So the one Agnes or Agnes, I
Anya,
guess
yeah,
Agnes.
it's like British, just like bravely default, right? So
Yeah,
that's how I tried to remember pronunciation.
yeah. Agnes Claudel it has arrived at Van's office to, get take his services because she's trying to find these Genesis that are scattered about, and basically like she's connected to Professor Epstein, which is like the inventor of orbaments, like he's kind of like the big important inventor that's kind of led to like all the things that are going on. He's basically like the bridge from the dark ages to the kind of modern day. Everything's based on Professor Epstein's uh, uh, work, I guess. And so she has these journals that he had written, and he had mentioned that there's these eight prototype orbaments called the Genesis that are kind of out there, and he's she's basically trying to track them down because he's kind of mentioned in these journals that these things are going to be like the ruin of society at some point. Like
Yeah.
it's basically like someone has to bring these together to prevent the end. And yeah, that's basically how things get about. Like you're Agnes begins working with Van to find the first one, and then they kind of at the end of, I guess it's at the end of the prologue, they kind of come to this agreement that she'll work part-time for his company, his private eye company, and he'll work with her on trying to find these Genesis. And that's kind of like the loop of each chapter. They're going to a new location and finding the Genesis, or finding a new Genesis, and kind of seeing like each one seems to have kind of a different power, and the bad guys are basically using these for nefarious means.
I guess the other part of it is the Almada faction, or they just referred to as A for I
Yeah,
can't
early
remember.
on they're just called A, but
It's called
then
A.
yeah, but then it's I think pretty quickly they explain like that it's called Almada, and that they're
Hmm.
they're kind of I guess the leader, like they had been around for a while, but they weren't that threatening, I guess. And then like a leader kind of quickly took power, and all of a sudden like things have escalated quickly, where they've become a real threat in a short amount of time.
Yeah. I don't know how you felt about it, but I thought like the overarching story is just less important, less significant than like just the chapter by chapter events. Like I thought like
Yeah.
the every kind of chapter felt like a little story on its own, and just going through those was really enjoyable. And there'd be like tidbits, and I guess as it goes further on, you get more of the main story and more about the importance of the Genesis orbits and stuff like that. But I just felt like every single chapter, going to a new story, meeting a new character, like all of that felt a lot more meaningful and enjoyable than however like the story ends up growing and getting to the end. Like I didn't totally care how much this story was going to wrap up in this game. I just really liked the little loop that it settles into quite quickly of every chapter. That's where I was getting most of my entertainment. I don't know if you felt the same, David.
Yeah, like it. Well, and knowing how Trails games kind of operate, I felt like the Genesis storyline was something that'll probably end up taking like the trilogy to flesh out anyway. Like I'm like, well, there's no way they're going to be getting all 8 by the end. Like this really feels like one of those. Well, it was just like with the Reen thing. Like you knew that the whole um overarching story of the curse or whatever was going to take the 3 or 4 games to figure out. Like this is, to me, this is what it is. Like the Genesis is now um the big MacGuffin that's going to take place over however many games this you know, I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy or if it's going to continue on, but yeah, it just feels like this is probably going to be a long running thing. So you always kind of have that, you know, over everyone's head, but the way they have the chapter set up is, yeah, like the focus is, they do a good job of like each chapter maintaining the focus on like the here and now,
For
like
sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's not a lot of like, oh, you have to kind of in your brain, you have to remember all these big details that are super significant. Like it's probably not until the later games in whatever however long this set of games goes. Like it's not till the later ones where like the overarching story becomes a little bit more prominent. I feel like in the early titles, yeah, you get a little bit more of the um, mic, microscopic, just not micro level as opposed to a macro level, right?
yeah,
It's a lot more about the individual towns and characters, and just this building bonds, I guess. And then once those bonds are established, and you don't really you know everybody pretty well, then you can kind of see the chess pieces on the board, and I guess how the things are playing out on a larger scale, or more macro perspective, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, I know there are a lot of characters here, not as many as in some of the Cold Steel games, but who really stood out to you? Like, who were some of your favorite characters to encounter?
um well, it's funny because like Van certainly takes, like, as the leading character, like he plays that leading role well.
Yeah.
Like he's very interesting. You know, he's got a personality, so he's not just like kind of a stoic character. He's got a lot of layers to him.
Mhm.
The I'm very interested in like there's like that backstory of like Elaine and Renee having grown up together, and there's kind of this clear chemistry or romance between him and Elaine. So I'm interested in watching that kind of play out. Um,
I love,
eh,
just an aside, I love how Van calls him Renee, and he's like, he
yeah,
insists that you call him Kincaid, right? It's great,
yeah,
great. Everyone else calls him Kincaid, and Van's the only one to call him Renee, and he always gets upset about it. It's great.
yeah. Well, I do love how they do that too, because it's like this character who's trying to kind of be grown up, like he's running the kind of CIA of Calvert, and and trying to be like this important person, and then Van's just like, oh, that's just old Renee. I used to noogie him back in
Yeah, they're
uh,
like school friends, and like
yeah,
there's a really great I guess distinction between the two, where like Van is like opened his own like shady business, and Renee's like running a city, right? It's like
yeah,
they're really worlds apart, but they're also still pals, and they can kind of clown on each other a little bit. Like I love their interactions are always funny. And just an aside, speaking about the characters and interactions between them, this is, I think it might be the funniest Trails game that I've played. Like
yeah.
again, maybe it's from the Sky games, introduce a little bit more humor, but it's a little bit more lighthearted, and the characters casually swearing all the time. Like
Oh,
there's
there's
something about the game, like it's just
yeah.
so funny.
I was actually taken aback by how much swearing was in
It's
it,
a
because
lot.
that,
Yeah, I know.
like, it doesn't bother me, but I'm just like, man, this is a lot different than the previous games. Like
Yes.
there
Yeah.
was the odd, I think there might have been the odd swear word, but for the most part, it kept it pretty clean. But they're just dropping like some big swear words like whenever,
Yeah,
like it's
well, I mean,
hilarious.
anytime Aaron's around, especially, like there's some
Yeah,
characters that are just more have a tendency towards more adult language, I guess. But it just, and I mentioned this in the review. There's just a lot more mature theming scenarios that encounter, right? Like that, and then that what goes with it is more adult or suggestive language too. Like there's all of that stuff is kind of putting this game in the more down to earth category as well. So yeah, if you go in kind of expecting like a familiar Trails experience, you're gonna have that, but also something else as well. That the the tone, the theme, the
yeah.
maturity of the game makes it feel quite different.
Now we can't get into this particular scene because it's in the third chapter. Like maybe we'll save it for a spoiler cast later on. But
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about maturity, there's this scene in the third chapter that is like pulled straight out of an '80s movie. Um, and I couldn't believe that it was in this game.
Yeah.
Like it's just crazy. Like the with Van and Aaron kind of go out into this night. They go to this establishment at night, and I was just like, man, I can't believe this is in here. Like I was
Yeah.
not expecting this.
I think a lot of things with Van and Aaron at nighttime, or just Van at nighttime, like um, it just see, you feel like you're seeing parts of cities that didn't exist in other areas of Zemuria, right? Like ones that you've been to maybe seemed a little bit more wholesome or something like that. But there's like kind of seedy, darker districts that you actually get into in a bunch of the cities in this game. And yeah, it follows that Aaron certainly has a taste for
Yeah.
that kind of nightlife and stuff like that. So yeah, I did love all of the more mature kind of tone and theme to the game, and just putting yourself in scenarios that felt unfamiliar to a fan of these games.
Yeah. So like you had mentioned like the party of four being kind of where things picked up. So we start with Van and we start with Agnes, and then in the first chapter, they go out into this countryside and they run into the third character, who Fairy. So she's kind of it's funny because she's very much like the Fille Clausel of the of the game,
Yes.
because she's like got almost like an identical backstory where she's kind of this young like 13-14-year-old Jaeger, um, who the first chapter, there's like a friend of hers from this other Jaeger Corps that gets killed, and she ends up joining up with Van, and to kind of I think it's like one of those where she realizes like her views of the world, or her like her father decides that she needs to get like more worldly experience, so he kind of sends her into the city with Van
Yeah.
to kind of get that experience. So you've got this like this foil of this younger kid who's a good fighter, but needs to learn the ways of the world. And then it's funny because in chapter 2 they go to this this city that's kind of run by Hayway, I think is, I
Hey,
always
yeah.
pronounce it wrong. Um, which we know from the Crossbell games, they were a big part of that. And you end up this guy Aaron Way, who's kind of this young brash character who, I guess, like he's a little too young to join Hayway because he's kind of like running this gang, but um, he ends up joining up with Van because he kind of has to leave the city behind because there's like some painful memories. And again, the same thing, like he's also looking to kind of gain some worldly experience,
Hmm.
and he comes along. And the contrast between the two is hilarious because Aaron is a very like he's making like mature jokes all the time that Fairy's not getting.
Yeah, that's
and,
right. Yes.
and so you kind of got this like younger character who doesn't understand, and then Aaron, who's like this kind of crude younger guy, and then Agnes is like trying to like smooth things out in between, like trying to smarten Aaron up and also trying to protect Fairy. Like what, he'll make like these sexual jokes, and then Fairy will be like, "What do you mean by that?" And Agnes will be like, "Nothing, nothing."
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Or Fairy has a little bit of Altina and Milliam to her as well. Like not
Yeah,
just Fee. Like I guess she's still a kid, like in a lot of ways, right? So yeah, they can say things that go over her head, but she's I guess just trying to find her way or be helpful, and like obviously she has like a lot of weight on her shoulders, being like soldier and I guess and family things that are that kind of become a little bit more apparent as you play more of the game. Um, Aaron, what I like about Aaron's kind of got like this. He's like the protector of his city too, right? He's very like important to the people of is it Longport? He's like a little bit like their hero. He's kind of standing
yeah,
up for them, and he sees like the political factions in the city kind of have their own agendas, and he's just no, like I don't really want to be a part of that. I want to kind of just be for the city, just the freedom fighter of the city almost, or like a superhero kind of thing. Just protecting Longport and the people there. But then, yeah, realizing that he can do more good and continue to grow if he joins up with a Van. Um, One thing I love about their dynamic is he's constantly referring to Van as like old man,
Yeah.
and just making fun of his
I'm
age. And
25, dude.
he's, he's like a handful of years older than him and still very much a young man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like they talk about like his like graying hair, like losing his hair, or something like that. I'm just like, it's a big, I mean, maybe, but like it's just funny for them to kind of keep coming back to that theme of like Van is like the old guard. He's seen so much, I guess, like by in terms of his experience, in terms of like his worldliness, is always he is an old man compared to the other characters who haven't seen very much. So it's a joke, but there's some truth there as well.
Yeah. Well, I also laugh because Aaron, because there's like this long running thing about like saunas and spas and stuff in the Trail
Always,
series,
yeah, always.
and Van continues that, but then like Aaron kind of mocks it, like,
Yeah, right.
"Oh, you're such an old guy, you need a sauna, eh?" And Van's like, "Just shut up, and enjoy it," you know. It's just funny that Aaron's kind of making fun of these like traditional things that are in the game, like and kind of attributing it to the oldness and stuff.
Yeah, that we're used to as players of these games. You know, we know those scenes are coming, and Aaron's just like, yeah, why are we here? Like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this? Like I think there's a quest in the game where you end up going. It's kind of tied into like one of those sauna areas or spa areas, and you kind of you have to like fix the pipes and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, here we go. But I mean, they're so, just from a gameplay perspective, they're so helpful because it's a way to like restore all of your meters, basically, right? So I at some point in every chapter, I would always, even if the story hadn't pushed me towards a spa yet, I would always go to one just to make sure that I'm ready for the next kind of combat sequence to pop up. And I would do the same thing in the other Trails games too. Like I would always seek out a spa to refill like my S-Craft meters and all that stuff. Like they serve a very practical purpose as much as they might be the butt of jokes or kind of I guess a stereotype kind of scenes that play out.
Yeah, I also really like the Judith Lannister character because there's so much comedy there too, with like the Grim Cat.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, like so there is this, and I love that she calls herself a Phantom Thief.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's like just all these little callbacks to older games that are hilarious. So they kind of run into her into this secure facility the first time, and she kind of sees Van and his party as kind of like rogues, like she doesn't really see them as the hero types early on, and is kind of like, and it's funny that both her and Elaine are kind of annoyed by the fact that Van has like Agnes and Fairy, who are like young girls, helping him. Like, what are you doing this late at night in a illegal facility, and you've got basically children with you?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it wasn't my choice.
No,
And it's
exactly.
like,
He always says like, I don't necessarily want them here. Like
yeah,
they want to be here. He just doesn't fight it anymore. You know, like he's not dragging them into battle per se. And a lot of
yeah,
times he does remind them to be careful and that he does have to protect them, and that he knows they need to kind of stand up for themselves as well, I guess. But yeah, it's funny. A lot of times, like other characters will call Van out for something that isn't his fault, or like that he didn't really set up. It's just like the way it is, or it's other characters that kind of foisted that upon him. So he does get that, a little bit of that lovable loser, those kind of sequences that happen as well, like that we've seen in other happen to protagonists in the other games too.
yeah. Well, and then there's, like you said, there's just so much comedy in this game because the other thing too is like, so it's almost weird that Ouroboros is not the main antagonist in the
Yeah,
game.
that's right.
But they still maintain a presence, and early on, like Walter the direwolf comes in, and then there's like this hilarious back and forth that Van hates Walter because Walter had thrown his car at an enemy.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And you find out that Walter like replaced the truck that he's driving is like one that Walter had given him, but Van is still salty at Walter because I guess like Van's like a big car guy, so he had all these. He's as he claims, he's like, I had all these different things built into it that I like aftermarket stuff that I put so much into the car, and then he just throws it at a robot like
That's
it was
right.
nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had only clued in maybe recently. Like Van's name is kind of I think it's kind of tied to his love of cars, right? His name is Van. His last name is Arkwright, right? Like
Yeah,
he's a rider, I guess.
yeah,
But yeah, there's so many scenes where you meet someone that Van has a history with, and that the history kind of slowly gets unpacked, maybe in that chapter or over a couple of chapters, and you just again we talked about like him being kind of worldly, having all this experience, but there's a lot of fun character moments that come from like learning about his background and interactions he's had with other people. It's like, oh, this is why you hate this person, or this is why you maybe a little bit weary of them, or you're really chummy with them or something like that. Like
yeah,
there's all these layers to not just Van himself, but like what's happened before you're getting into this game, like that he's had all these adventures and you're kind of learning about a lot of them kind of piecemeal, and that's kind of fun too. It does flesh out the world of Calvert as well.
yeah. I think the funniest scene, at least early on, was when they were on the way to Longport and there was like a traffic jam, and Van's like, I'm just gonna have a nap, and while they're like stuck in the on the highway,
Yeah, I remember it.
and then the race car driver comes over and starts hitting on the girls, and
That's
then Van just wakes up out of nowhere and just like accuses him of being a pedophile,
Yeah.
and then races him on the highway.
And yeah, and then sure enough, it's not just like, oh, this guy's a creep. Let's get away from him. It's like, no, we also have to race him. Like,
Yeah,
and then I think that the sequence can play out that like, or does play out that he like the race car driver gets into like an accident or something like that, and you end up having
yeah,
to like help him get to the town, or help him fix his car or whatever like that. It's the Van is like he can be an even better racer than this professional race car driver. It's like, okay, like what kind of life have you been leading that this is where we're at? But
yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I like that they've worked in like, so again, this game, like Out Trails games, it has like the SP where there's I use quotes, hidden hidden quests, because they're not really hidden, if you just kind of check your map, but there's lots of optional quests, I guess would be the way to put it,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you can earn SP, which increases your rank at the end of a chapter. Like they'll do where it's like they'll list all the quests you've done, and then if you did them there are ways to kind of fail, like that race, like if you don't you won't get the full points if you don't. There's like two choices that you have to make to win the race or whatever, and if you do the choices right, you'll get the full points towards like your ranking at the end of the chapter, and so there's you get the rank. I also find it hilarious that there's at the end of the chapter they determine who the employee of the month was,
oh, so good, yeah,
and that character will get stats boosts um, based on that. And it's funny because I think Fairy, ever since I got Fairy, she's been the employee of the month every chapter, which is like I couldn't even tell you. I didn't really look into like what determines that, if it's like something based on the amount of damage, or like I have no idea, or just maybe how much they were used or something. Like I always kept Fairy in the main party for the combat, which I guess we should probably get into now. Um, the combat is much different than not much different. It's different enough from earlier games, because in this one there's like a multiplier boost where depending on every time you hit a character, there's uh, in a sequence, like if there's like a multiplier that adds up. So like if you have a character that like does an attack that like hits the character 10 times,
yeah,
then you've got like this 10 count. So if you have another character of yours that does another attack, then it keeps adding up and it can multiply the damage if you're getting the hits in before the enemy hits you back, and resets the meter. So I was using Fairy a lot because her S attack is like this machine gun. So like you get like 15 hits right off the bat.
yeah. Builds up the multiplier really fast.
Yeah, so like if I was ever in a tough fight, then I would essentially like try to go in with Fairy having an S attack, and then Van having an S attack, and then you could just like multiply the damage like really early on in
Hmm.
the fight. You could take out like half of the damage in like 2 hits, like right off the bat. So, but yeah, I liked that they reset the combat anyway. Like they have this it's still like that kind of strategic turn based, but there's a few changes that I make it better, where one thing that I really enjoy in this game is that when it's whoever's turn it is, you don't have to sacrifice their attack in order to move. Like they give you that kind of this ring of where you can kind of move the character around and then do the attack. But then they also have like different bonuses based on your positioning. Like if you're so close to an ally, then they'll attack as well with you. But then when you put yourself close to an ally, you're also putting yourself in a position where multiple people can be hit by the enemy. So there's like this risk reward of, oh well, if Van and Ferry are standing next to each other, then when they attack, they'll do more damage because it gives you the boost. But then if the enemy's doing this area of attack, they're both going to get hit. And then there's a whole bunch of different battles where it's like you can't be close to each other or you're just going to get wrecked because they do these like massive attacks where one, they can wipe out a party pretty quickly if you're all standing next to each other. um but you still have like your arts, and you still have your crafts, and you still have like your S attacks. um but I feel like in this game they've kind of gone back to arts being more important, or at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
more important than the cold steel. Like cold steel, you really just kind of concentrate on your crafts and making sure you have enough CP to do the crafts. And then arts were kind of an afterthought almost to a certain extent. Like you
Hmm.
could do them, but they weren't exactly like you would use arts to heal yourself. But I didn't feel like I was doing too many arts in actual attacks in the cold steel.
I remember using arts only to like to buff my stats, or to raise my CP. Like that's what I
Yeah,
would do in the Cold Steel games. But as long as I went into battles with full CP meters, I was really just spamming S crafts,
yeah,
and you could
yeah,
win almost all the battles playing it that way.
yeah,
I played Daybreak on normal difficulty, just for the sake of conversation, and I could not just rely on S crafts. Like yeah, like you said, I had to use arts a lot.
yeah.
Really had to focus on enemy weaknesses, moving the characters around. Like yeah, it's a really dynamic and smart way of doing it. I think like you want to have characters close together really often because not only will it give them like a follow up hit, but it'll make every attack more effective. And you mentioned that combo meter. That's a huge thing. Like if you can set up a combo meter so that you've done a bunch of attacks, and then maybe you unleash an S-craft at the end of that too, like when the multiplier is already built up, you can do so much more damage too.
Hmm.
So you do have to be smart about what characters you're bringing into battle, how many attacks their moves will hit for, what kind of abilities what kind of arts they bring in. Like you probably want to have a good spread of offensive arts for every battle, because you don't know exactly what an enemy's weak point is going to be. But yeah, hitting those like the 1.5 multiplier weak points with arts like that, you can do a ton of damage. Like, and yeah, where sometimes you're doing more damage than just crafts and S crafts might do. Like I think of Anya's in particular. Like I had her arts stats like so high just from her items and from I guess the way I slotted her orbits or whatever. But she was doing so much damage with arts that like I would prioritize like keeping her alive and giving her the ability to cast arts very quickly and have a lot of like EP so she could keep casting them, right? Like I can't think of another game in the series where I prioritized magic so highly compared to this
Yeah.
one.
Well, and I like it because the original Trails of the Sky was that way. Like arts was more important than crafts.
Yeah, that's true.
Having that right combination, and I also like in this game there's a much bigger emphasis on putting your the quartz and having it in kind of like the right spots in your oh man, I can't remember Ignis. I can't remember what the little in Calvard, the thing that the quartz sits in has a different name, and I forget. But
Yeah, yeah. I actually found that part of the game a little tricky. Like
It's
it's not as
confusing.
straightforward as
Yeah.
the other games where you slot something in, it tells you exactly what abilities you get.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to follow here, and I think you really have to kind of read more about it, or focus on it to fully understand it. It's not as maybe cut and dry as some of the other games. And again, I know that they kind of they shifted things up here, and so there's just that learning curve, right?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, like that's the thing is that it's because it's more important. You do kind of have to force yourself to learn, like, because the different uh, elements, boost each other, and then you see, like, okay, if I put this quartz here and then this quartz here, then I get this ongoing boost. But if you're not prioritizing it, or if you're not like some in the cold steel games, like I wasn't even really too concerned about having like strong quartz
Yeah.
in there. Like it was just like one of those things, like, oh, I got this quartz, I'll throw it in one of the slots, no big deal. Like it you know just get it in there and not worry about it or whatever. But here, like, you really do need to um, prioritize different, like, the making sure that that you've got the right combination of like fire, or you got the right combination of wind or whatever. And then you also have to make sure that you have characters that have the healing quartz in place too, because like there was a couple, like early on I wasn't really paying too much attention, and all of a sudden, like, my one healer gets killed, and I'm like, oh crap, I don't have any way to heal or to revive,
Yeah.
because like my healer went down. So I'd have to shift things around so that like maybe somebody could do with it Thelis to revive, or if somebody had Tira or something, like, or having like the holy breath to do like party heals and stuff. Like they've really gone back towards like having the quartz be a much more important, so you have to put a lot more emphasis on it. And then I like that they've kind of replaced the brave warders with this new setup, like the shards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whenever you start a battle, you start off with like three shard slots, and then uh, again, there's like so much strategy involved, because if you do an S craft, you'll get an additional shard slot added. So you could kind of like increase these, and they're useful in the match, because if you activate a shard, then it boosts your attack. But then you also have to be careful, because if you use the boost two, like if you use two shards, like you could actually turn off the ability to use one of the S crafts.
That's right. Yeah, I ran into that early on too. Like when I was still kind of fiddling around and trying to figure it out, I'm like, why can't I use S crafts? Like my meters are full, and then I realized that the shard meter was empty, or that I've already used one and kind of depleted half of it.
Yeah.
What was cool is that you could build up that shard meter though. You could have it so there's more empty shards to fill up, and then if you just held off on using S crafts for a while, or cashing in some of those shards to power up your attacks. If you waited, you could have like 6 or 7 at some point. Just build up that meter so that its maximum is a lot greater, and then you could just do a bunch of S crafts all in a row. And that would be a good way, once, especially if you found you've built up the multiplier a little bit, then you can just go back to back to back and just do a ton of damage.
I feel like it's a reaction to the spamming of crafts from Cold Steel, because like you said, like all you really needed to do in Cold Steel was like go into a battle with full CP, and you could just spam the S crafts, and then the battle's done.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, they're like, okay, if you try this, then you're going to run out of shards pretty quick, and you're going to just get trounced. Like they're really set it up that you can't just go in with like us and spam the same thing every time. Like it's set up well that way, that it's like, no, you got to think about some of these battles.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've mentioned it so far, but there's also the action combat, or the action RPG side of the game, where when you're in a dungeon, you can just attack enemies, by kind of swiping your sword, or whatever character you have out in front, using their weapon to do basic attacks. And then you have like a meter that charges up, where you can do like a special attack that can sometimes stun them, so you can do more damage. And you can beat basic enemies just by attacking them in the field. You don't even have to enter combat. After stunning them on the field, you can also turn on the turn-based combat, or activate shards so that you can get into turn-based combat, and you'll have an opportunity to do some extra damage there too, and set up so your first attack will be a little bit stronger. And I really like that. Actually, it reminded me of like the Ease games, like Ease 8 and Ease 9, where you're not doing a turn-based combat necessarily all the time. You've got the action side of it.
It's much more basic though. Like
It's
it's
very simple. Yeah,
not really comparable to ease because it's like all you're really doing is just kind of slashing. It's
yeah,
to me it's almost false advertising to call to say there was action RPG because it's almost it reminds me of RPGs where you get so powerful that the random encounters on the world screen are just like auto wins.
yeah, yeah,
Because to me that's kind of what this is set up to be. It's like there's times where you'll go back to dungeons earlier in the game where it's like the enemies are just jokes. Like you're like it'd be like if you go into a turn base, it's like one hit, you're done. So this is kind of just like, oh, don't worry about fighting. Like the characters are running around there. Just whack them with a sword and then they're dead, and you just move on. Because that really to me that seemed like the point of the action part was just to be like it's almost like valuing your time of like, well, don't waste your time with these kind of piddly random encounters. Just whack them a couple times and move along. Like you said, the only real benefit would be as if you used there is kind of like a regular attack, and then you could use a shard to do a powerful attack, and that would stun them so that you could kind of if there was like and you can tell by the size of them or if they're glowing or whatever, that the more powerful ones, so you could kind of hit the more powerful ones with that and then get a little bit of a um boost out right off the bat in an attack. But to me, I didn't see much like use. Like the action RPG part was pretty muted compared to what when they were talking about, oh well, the Trails games are moving into this hybrid, and it's like I don't know if I'd call it a hybrid, but it's certainly there, I guess.
it's funny. I think you and I had a different experience then because I used this quite extensively in the dungeons. I
Uh,
rarely I tried to avoid turn based combat in the dungeons as much as I could. So I would really only use it for like bosses, and then maybe a handful of fights from the beginning to the end. Otherwise, I was using the action combat just to grind my characters up a little bit more, and just to I guess just for that change of pace. Like that I know in a 40 to 60 hour game there's going to be a lot of combat, turn based combat. So I
yeah.
don't need tons of it. I don't need it for all of the kind of basic fights that I'm running into. So yeah, I would do the hacking and slashing, as simple as it was, just to to get more items, to get more what are the little elemental crystal called, that you use to make armaments, or
Oh, quartz.
no, the
Oh, Sepith.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, so I would fight enemies just to get more items, get more money, Sepith, and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I found myself beginning to end, especially I think of like there's a big desert space in one of the chapters that you go to, and there's just tons of enemies there. It's a huge kind of dungeon-esque kind of space. And there I would just like run around the desert, like opening up the map, getting treasures, and just slashing at enemies. And I would do that. I would do that kind of action combat until I noticed like my characters weren't gaining a lot of experience, and I thought, okay, I'm probably at the right level where I need to be. I don't need to do any more grinding. So I wouldn't go nuts with it where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be super overpowered, but I would go to the point where the experience gains were really minimal, and so I'm probably I felt like, okay, that's kind of the game telling me I'm probably at the right level for the rest of the chapter, and so the challenge ended up being a good one. And I just it felt kind of refreshing to not have to do as many turn-based encounters in a long game like this. So I'm curious to hear what if you're listening to this and you've played Trails Through Daybreak. I'm curious if how into the action elements of the kind of dungeon spaces did you get, or did you stick to more? What was your percentage split between the action side and the turn-based combat? I'm sure, just thinking about fans of the series, you like the combat, and the changes to the combat are into the turn-based side are interesting enough that you're right, David, to say I think calling it a hybrid, or saying that like it's a whole new direction, just adding that side, no. But I think the things they did inside the turn-based combat combined with that do give the combat overall a new flavor for sure.
Yeah. I think one of the things we should probably address too is like this is on multiple consoles, and so I played on PS5,
Mhm.
and I clearly had no no issues whatsoever.
No, no.
Game looked great, plays great. There's like no loading. It's just bam, bam, bam. Like there's had absolutely no issues at all. Game looked great, great. Game sounds great. Like you still get the iconic Falcom music, which is terrific. Had no complaints there, but I'm fairly certain, and you could tell us to the extent of it. Like the Switch version is clearly the inferior of the of the options available.
Oh yeah, of course. And you know what? I think that just thinking about all the Trails games, having played basically all of these games on Switch, I shouldn't say all of them, but play so Cold Steel 3, 4, Reverie, Zero, and now Daybreak. Having played all of those games on Switch, like I can kind of see like the ebbs and flows or the peaks and valleys of how these games are performing on Switch. And I think this is generally a decent port. I don't think it's definitely not the worst one. Reverie had a lot more issues than this game did. Um, there there is slowdown. The end of the game, the kind of final chapter sequences in particular, there's a lot. Some of the busy city spaces, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of slowdown. I think Pop In is the biggest kind of culprit or worst part of the Switch performance. You'll have empty spaces that just end up filling up with people. They kind of just pop into existence, and so that's always a little bit jarring. Load times, I guess, a little bit frequent, but no, they weren't. I weren't game breaking or anything like that. I liked how you could go in and out of a lot of buildings without load screens, and I don't know if that's just a new thing for this game compared to some of the other ones, but it felt a little bit more. Maybe respecting of your time that you don't have to load the city area as soon as you leave like an inn or a person's house or something like that. Like the going in and out of doors not having load screens was nice. But yeah, this is definitely not the worst performing Trails game on Switch, and I know that doesn't sound like a glowing recommendation, but playing the game, and I did handheld and docked probably about 50-50, which isn't characteristic for me, but I did anyways. I thought the experience was fine. Like I don't think it's a major sacrifice if you do want to play this portably, or just you want the ability to take the game with you and sometimes put it on your TV. You don't know what your split is going to be. I think playing it on Switch is fine. Obviously, and we know this, like these games, like they run super well and they look great on a PS5 for sure. But yeah, I think the Switch version is admirable, and I wouldn't say that it's such a sacrifice that you absolutely can't play there. I think the port is a decent one.
Yeah, basically, like if that's your preferred or only option or preferred option, then
Yeah,
it'll run.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I had the PS5 version, but I've got the streaming set up on my iPad and Steam Deck where I like so on whenever I wanted to play portably, I could just turn on my iPad, use my DualSense controller, like connect it via Bluetooth, and then just play it like it was right on the iPad, which
Hmm.
looked fantastic because the iPad screen's pretty nice, and I didn't notice any delay or lag or anything, especially with like turn-based games like this. You really don't notice anything out of the ordinary, so you're not looking down at the
Mhm.
milliseconds of the input or whatever. So and then the same with the Steam Deck. Like I was able to set up the streaming there again. It just like connects to the PS5 locally, and then I could just play on those screens. So it worked out pretty well. So anyone, I guess it's one of those things like if you're going outside of the house, that's going to be a different story. Like I just enjoy sometimes playing portably around the house. Like if the kids are using the TV and I just kind of want to sneak away for an hour, in a different part of the house, then it's nice to be able to do that. But if I you had like a commute to work or something, then yeah, I would say that unless you have like a Steam Deck where you're playing it natively, the Switch is probably going to be your only good option.
Yeah, and I'm actually in that boat too. Where when I am playing portably on Switch, it is generally in my house. Like on occasion, I'll take it to a place that I'm going. Like if I take it to my office or something like that, or if I know I'm going to have a little bit of time in the car while I'm waiting for my wife or the kids or something like that, I'll play it there too. But yeah, it is most of the time in the house. I thought that was fine. I played docked a lot more than usual just because I was trying to grab a little bit more footage from different scenes. And so I had my capture device set up. And with long RPGs, it's hard when you know you're going to make a video. Like how and when to capture footage is always a little bit of a tricky thing to figure out. The nice thing is there's tons of save slots. I think there's about
Yeah,
20 or
I
so,
was just
right?
gonna say, oh, is that all? I think I'm up to like 100
Is there more?
saves.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no, there doesn't seem to. Maybe I'll hit a limit at some point, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, so there's a distinction with the Switch version. There's no way it's that many. I think it's 20 or 30. There is a cap for sure, and whatever it is, I reached it. So
Yeah,
there may be that difference as well. But yeah, no, this is a really really good game, and I think it's a great. I think you can start here with in terms of Trails games. I don't think starting
yeah.
here
I
is a bad thing, right?
meant to say that. I was gonna say that, to me, this game takes over as because you hear it all the time. Like there's so many games in Legend of Hero series. Where should I
Where
start?
do I start?
And there's always this like, oh, you should start with Cold Steel, or you should start with Zero, or you should start Trails in the Sky. And it's like, you know what? No, you should start with this one. Like it's going to be the easiest to get a hold of, like the most accessible because it's
Hmm.
on every console. And it's one of the, like, maybe I'm sure that the other one started off this way too, but to me, like, you don't need any past history of any of the ongoing saga to be able to understand what's going on in this.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if a few recurring characters certainly show up, but they're not in a way where it's like, when Zin shows up, you don't need to know everything about Zin. You don't need
Oh,
to know
not at
like
all.
his history from Trails and Sky. You don't need to know like where his rank in the bracer is or anything. Like he's not really there in that capacity. All you like the game explains he's this important bracer, and that's all you really need to know. you know.
Yeah, I think anyone that shows up that fans of the series will have seen before. They give you enough context to understand who this person is, what they've kind of done before, where they come from, and they're more almost Easter eggs than like required reading or something like
Yeah.
that. Whereas with the other games, like there is a lot of background, and starting with Cold Steel 3 or 4 is tougher. Starting with the Crossbell games might be tougher because like there's so many kind of connected events and relationships and stuff there. But this is all fairly fresh, I think. And I think the fact that this is the beginning of a new big story arc or a new big kind of overarching plot that it is focused a lot more on the nitty gritty details and the new cities that you're visiting. So it's a great place to hop in, especially knowing that there's at least one other game for this arc coming next year and maybe more. We'll see, but yeah, it probably is the new contender for best game to get into. And like you said, it's available everywhere, and even the Switch version runs decently well. Yeah, I not only just an excellent RPG, but for kind of a franchise that's just grown and the popularity has grown as well. Um, I imagine there's a lot more people looking to get into it somewhere, so this is probably as good a spot as any.
Yeah, I feel like you said, the it seems like the popularity around the franchises has grown, and to me, like this is only going to help because it's going to bring in more people. People are going to try it, and I think as a first game like this, like gives you kind of the spirit of the series. It does everything well that the series does well. Like this is kind of like a perfect. It's like if you want to know what this franchise is all about, play this game, and then if you like it, then you're gonna like everything else. So it could lead to more. And it's good that they're talking about potentially remaking Trails in the Sky, because
Mhm.
you could easily see like all these people coming in and playing Daybreak and going, wow, this is great. Like how can I, maybe I'm going to start from the beginning. And all of a sudden Falcom's like, well, here you go. Here's the, we just remade the first trilogy, and
Yeah. So there's a method to the madness, you're saying,
yeah,
in terms
it's
of like,
almost like they've got a plan.
I know with the localizing and the remastering and re-releasing. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
people have been asking for the Sky games to be brought forward for years, and companies aren't deaf to this stuff. Like they hear the chatter, they know what fans are asking for. It's just a matter of like, do the dollars and cents
Mm.
line up, and
That
um,
dang licensing.
yeah, that too, exactly.
It seems like Falcom's smoothed things over with Xseed, though.
Yeah, well, again, there's money to be made here, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not why get like possessive about things or nitpicky about things when like you can just come together and hopefully make some kind of arrangement where everybody profits. Fans, the companies making these games, the artists, everybody. So yeah, hopefully we'll hear about that soon. I think we probably will.
Yeah.
Probably by Tokyo Game Show kind of timing or Gamescom or something like that.
I feel like Trails in the Sky remake would be like a perfect launch Switch 2 launch game.
That'd be sweet. Yeah, that'd be really, really
Yeah.
good. Again, they recognize that like there's a fairly large fan base on Switch for these games too. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we get Cold Steel 1 and 2 as well as a compilation, kind of like we had. There's the PS4 and PS5 compilation of those two
Yeah.
games as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that comes at some point. With all the Switch 2 backwards compatibility stuff, you're probably going to get a lot of those late ports is just something that's built into
Yeah.
the Nintendo kind of platform. So
Yeah.
yeah. But we're running along here talking about a game that we both loved quite a bit. Looking forward to maybe be doing a spoiler cast on this one soon as well. But yeah, let us know. Have you played Trails Through Daybreak? There's a demo available widely. It's definitely worth checking out if you haven't gotten into it yet, or even if you're completely new to the series. Like, check out the demo and consider picking up the games. I don't think you would regret it. David, any final thoughts from you?
No, I echo the same thing. As a longtime Trails fan, I was very happy that this game turned out, especially after the sour taste in my mouth from Reverie.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely erased that. It's like the sweets that Van
Yeah,
seems to
exactly.
love. It's just I've gotten the sweet taste of Trails again, and I'm very very happy that they've been able to stay on track and make a terrific game.
For sure. Yeah, yeah, agreed. And now we can look forward to Ease 10, which I think is coming out October, I want to say. I think I got an October
Yeah,
release
not too
date
far.
for Ease 10 Nordic, which is, I can't wait for that game too.
Well,
Falcom continuing to hit.
Renatus is coming out soon too, right?
And Metaphor, like all these like kind of RPGs that are in a similar vein, right? Like
Yeah.
very, very kind of they putting the J in JRPG, and they all look fantastic. So
Yeah.
yeah, very excited. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us for our discussion of Trails Through Daybreak. Again, if you picked up the game or you plan to, let us know your impressions of it. You can always email David at thethirstymage.com. Join our Discord. There's always new people popping into our Discord, which is great to see. Trying to be a little bit more active there. My attention's always drawn in a million different directions, but it is a great place to meet and chat about games and with other Thirsty Mage listeners. But yeah, that's all for us for this week. We'll be back again with another episode soon. Bye for now.
Bye.